Welcome to the Nebraska Swimming Pool Operator Clinic. I'm Troy Huffman, the coordinator for the swimming pool program for the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. The clinic outline that we're going to be covering today, the basic overview of our clinic, is going to be the first section covering the healthy swimming. What is it that we need to be concerned about in relation to swimming pools to make sure that they're safe? The second section we're going to be covering is the rules and regulations that govern swimming pools in the state of Nebraska. Then we're going to be going over circulation and filtration in our swimming pools. We're going to be addressing water balance. The next section is going to be water treatment, water test methods, and then the final section we're going to be covering is water spas. So to begin with our first section, healthy swimming. What is it that are enemies to our disinfectant, those body discharges, the mucus, the saliva, those things that get into our swimming pool from the environment, workplace soil, pollen, dirt, animal droppings, the occasional squirrel that feels like they just need to get into that swimming pool and can't seem to make it out by the next morning. We need to understand what it is that's going to cause problems within our disinfection, our chlorine, the enemies to those chlorine, the fecal residue, the body grime, the dead skin. I like to refer to them as our public bathers. Those kids put those swimsuits on at the beginning of the summer and they never take them off all summer long. They swim in them, they'll play baseball in them, they'll go down to the river and swim. They use your swimming pool as their bathtub. We need to make sure that we dose those body lotions, the creams, the personal care items. The key thing that I want you to take home from this slide is we want people to shower with soap before they enter that swimming pool. We want to dramatically reduce the demand that's being placed on that disinfectant in our pool, making a healthy environment for our swimmers. Common waterborne diseases, things that we need to be concerned about, eye infections, the conjunctivitis, the pink eye, eyeball snot is what I like to refer to it as, skin infections, respiratory infections. All of these things we want to watch our bathers, screen them for those sore inflamed eyes, the colds, the nasal discharges. Exclude these bathers from the swimming pool. The weekend softball guy that's got the great big raspberry down the side of his leg because he just had to slide into third base. Explain to those people that it's best interest for them to avoid swimming in our pools. It's just not safe for them to be in the swimming pool. Use me as the bad guy. Exclude these people from our swimming pools. Make sure our swimming pools are safe. Now, we talk about emerging new germs. I really don't know if there's any really new germs that are out there that have all of a sudden arrived. I think we've gotten better as scientists as identifying what those items are that are causing us to get sick. Some of these can be life-threatening for high-risk populations, the elderly, people in poor health, pregnant women. And who are the number one client in our swimming pools? Those young children. That is who we need to be most concerned about when we talk about germs that are causing people to get sick. Now, when I mentioned emerging new germs, there are some new germs that are out there that have evolved or changed, if you will. One of them in particular is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. This is a bacteria that has changed over time. The overuse, the abundant use of penicillin, this bacteria has evolved and changed into something that is incredibly difficult to get rid of now. Some other things that we've learned a lot more in the last several years is Cryptosporidium. Now that's a parasite. We're really going to focus on that Cryptosporidium parasite. Shigella, E. coli, some very common bacteria that we've heard about a lot of times in reference to food items, which is kind of like a fecal oral type of transmission that we need to be mostly concerned about. What is it that causes people most likely to get sick in our swimming pools? There was a study that was done over the course of about a 9-year time frame, and they looked at waterborne disease outbreaks within the United States. 65% of the outbreaks were associated with that nasty parasite, Cryptosporidium. The rest of those bacteria around the bottom side of that pie chart, not so much of a concern. E. coli bacteria, only 6% of the time were causing waterborne outbreaks, but 65% of the time were associated with Cryptosporidium parasite. Now, why is that? What is it that this study identified that makes crypto so much of a concern? The items across the bottom of that pie chart are very sensitive to chlorine. It really doesn't take very much chlorine to cause those bacteria and those viruses to be destroyed. The Cryptosporidium parasite, however, is very resistant to chlorine. It takes a lot of chlorine for us to be able to kill that particular parasite. How much does it take for us to get sick or for us to destroy those bacteria, if you will? E. coli bacteria, in less than 1 minute, in the environment of 1 part per million chlorine, at a pH of 7.5. Now, if we had that situation in a Nebraska swimming pool, we'd have a little bit of a problem because we require a minimum of 2 parts per million chlorine. But in that environment, for this particular study, at 1 part per million chlorine, a pH of 7.5, in less than 1 minute, that E. coli bacteria, mostly associated with fecal type of situations, fecal oral transmission, was destroyed. Now, the hepatitis A virus, that virus is transmitted again by fecal oral transmission. In less than 16 minutes, it was destroyed. Now, that nasty parasite, Cryptosporidium, it took 15,300 minutes. If you do the math, that's 10.6 days for that parasite to be destroyed. That, I think, is probably the case because it probably just starved to death. There probably wasn't very much of an impact on that chlorine to that particular parasite. We did our own study in Nebraska. We looked at where the biggest risk for contamination, where the most violation had occurred in our inspection reports, where the greatest risk for contamination in our swimming pools could have happened, and what did we find? What did we identify as the biggest problem? The wading pools, those kiddie pools in our facilities. The clientele that uses that facility, most susceptible to the viruses, to the bacteria that we're concerned about, and they have one of 3 functions in life at that particular age. They're either eating, sleeping, or pooping. Now, we know we've got rules against them eating in our swimming pools, and they're having fun playing, so they're probably not sleeping in the swimming pools. At some point in time, they are probably going to poop in our pools. So that's where we talk about the greatest risk for contamination. We need to focus most of our time towards those particular parts of our facility. So when we add it all up, when we look at the big picture, if you will, we've got germs that are resistant to our number 1 type of disinfectant in our swimming pool, Cryptosporidium, resistant to chlorine. Poor pool maintenance. Which part of the apartment complex do you hope you're swimming in or you live in to you be able to swim in that swimming pool on the north end of this particular slide? Poor pool maintenance. We identified that the wade pools are the biggest concern in our swimming pools in the state of Nebraska. Young children with diarrhea. Now that's the key part of this slide, or this particular component, is the diarrhea aspect of this. Young children with diarrhea is what we need to be most concerned about. And then bathers swallowing the pool water. If you add all of this up, you have an increased risk for outbreaks, an increased concern for people getting sick. What is the easiest component out of those 4 items that we add up for people to get sick to take care of? Eliminate that risk. Don't drink the pool water. If you don't consume that bacteria, you're not going to be placed at risk. That's one of the easiest things that we can do, and we can emphasize to our patrons in our facilities. Looking at the big picture, how much does it take for us to get sick? For Salmonella bacteria. We also look at Shigella and E. coli. For a healthy adult, it takes quite a lot of those bacteria, but when you consider that we can put thousands of these onto the head of a pin. When we look at that nasty parasite that I mentioned, we're going to really focus on the Cryptosporidium parasite. For our toddlers, one of the number 1 clients in our swimming pools, it only takes one of those Cryptosporidium parasite to cause them to get incredibly sick. We talk about the symptoms. What is it that we normally see the symptoms associated with Cryptosporidium? We've actually had outbreaks in Nebraska, and we've identified what causes people to get sick. One diarrhea accident will literally release millions and millions of germs into the environment. for hepatitis A virus in less than 1 gram of fecal material. 1 gram, which is less than a paper clip in weight. 1 gram of fecal material is somebody that is contaminated with hepatitis A. You can have literally between 10 million to 30 million viral particles introduced into the environment. And I mentioned we had outbreaks of cryptosporidium in Nebraska. When we interviewed these people, out of the 220 potential cases, the age ranged between 2 months to 77 years of age. We found that 18% of those individuals continued to swim, the symptoms associated with crypto. When we interviewed these people, one of the adjectives that almost all of them used to describe their symptoms was diarrhea, and a particular type of diarrhea was explosive diarrhea. These people were unable to control their bowel functions, but yet 18%, between 40 to 50 of those people that we interviewed, continued to swim in our swimming pools and were unable to control their bowel functions. Because of that, we need to have established procedures on how we are going to handle fecal accidents when they occur in our swimming pools. We've got CDC guidelines that identify what it is, the procedures that we need to follow in relation to a fecal accident in our swimming pool. But the first thing we need to identify is how are we going to handle different types of fecal accidents in swimming pools? How are we going to handle that cryptosporidium incident? The first thing we need to identify is, do we need to handle a formed stool accident the same as a diarrhea accident? Study was done. They found volunteers. They collected 300 samples over the course of this study and identified whether or not those formed stool samples were positive for cryptosporidium, and not a single one of them tested positive for crypto. None of them. In fact, every sample that's been collected and tested on a formed stool incident has never tested positive for crypto. So our number one thing that causes people to get sick in swimming pools, if it's a formed stool accident, do we need to be concerned? No, not very much concerned at all. So when we have a diarrhea accident, that is where we need to be most concerned and focus most of our attention on. Centers for Disease Control has a fantastic website in relation to swimming, healthy swimming and swimming situations. The information that was probably given to you at the beginning of the presentation has the CDC information, the healthy swimming section on their website available. There's lots of great posters and information that you can download that's available to you as a pool operator. And I encourage you to go to their website and find their information and make that information available to your patrons. The next section that we're going to go over are the rules and regulations that govern swimming pools in the state of Nebraska. About 50 years ago, the legislature passed a law that says we want to see that swimming pools are safe. We want to reduce the opportunity for disease transmission, drownings and near drownings, and injuries in swimming pools in the state. The state legislature passed that law, which enabled the state health department to go ahead and write the rules and regulations that have evolved to what we have today, Title 178, Chapter 2. All pools in the state of Nebraska must be licensed by Department of Health and Human Services. Some local jurisdictions do require that you will also need to have a local permit in order for you to open and operate your swimming pool. The plans and specifications associated with swimming pools on a new or reconstructed swimming pool, you must submit plans and specs. If you have made any change or any modification to that swimming pool, they must be submitted by an engineer or architect, and that information must identify those changes that have been made. On a like-for-like replacement in a swimming pool, what I mean by that is if you have a section of pipe that has broken and needs to be replaced, you cut that piece out and replace it with a new piece of pipe. Or a filter springs a leak and you go out and you purchase the same type of filter, the same dimensions, the same basic information relating to that filter or that motor or that pump, then it is considered a like-for-like replacement, does not need plans and specification to be submitted. if you've added a slide, you've decided to switch from one type of chlorine to another type of chlorine, or from chlorine to bromine, or from tablets to a liquid type of feed system. That is not a like-for-like change, and you need to have an engineer or architect work with the state of Nebraska, submit those plans and specs, and get that information or get that project approved prior to construction. If it's not submitted and approved prior to construction, the plan submittal fee increases by $1,000. We do not want to see any individual, any agency have to go through a as-built plan submittal and have to pay that extra $1,000 fee. Please be sure to submit those plans and specs. If you're not sure the project that you're planning on doing, whether it's a like-for-like replacement or would actually be considered something that would need to have an engineer or architect submit the information, call the department and find out if it is a project that needs to be reviewed, just to be on the safe side. The classifications for swimming pools in the state of Nebraska that were identified by law are Class A, probably one of the most predominant classes of license for a swimming pool that we have. Those are those political subdivisions, the governmental agencies, basically your community, your city types of swimming pools. The second biggest class we've got are going to be those hotel, motel, apartment-like complexes, the country clubs. Those are identified as Class B swimming pools in the state of Nebraska. The Class C swimming pools would be our spas, the hot tub type of facilities. Wading pools, which would be a stand-alone type of wading pool. It has its own circulation system, has its own disinfection system, would have its own separate classification of Class D. Spray parks. Now, a spray park where the water is taken from tap water that is not kept and is drained to waste is not a licensed facility in the state of Nebraska. But a spray park that does recycle that water that has been sprayed out of that orifice or dumped out of that bucket and is gathered and then redirected back through the system does need to be licensed as a Class E type of facility. And then the final classifications are those health club type facilities, the fitness centers, those community fitness centers would be our Class F classifications. If you provide or have a bathhouse, which is required at a Class A swimming pool, it needs to be disinfected on a daily basis. Not only disinfected back in that bathhouse, but check that area on a regular basis. Make sure that there's not a lot of clothes and shoes and debris and things like that back in that bathhouse area. Liquid soap needs to be provided, not bar soap, and we want to have paper towels also provided. That liquid soap, we do not like to see bar soap because of the slip hazard in our facilities. Water temperature is important. A minimum temperature at any of our fixtures is 90 degrees minimum temperature. Now, we do allow a maximum number of 115, and that's only under the situation where you can adjust both the hot and the cold water. The hot water temperature in that type of setup can go up to a maximum of 115. Now, if you've got a single temp type of facility or type of shower or type of fixture, that would be an example where you walk up to that shower head, you pull that chain, and the water comes out. You don't have any opportunity to adjust the temperature of that water. We consider those, we call them a single temp type fixture, single temp type shower. The maximum that we can allow in one of those particular fixtures is 105. We want to be sure that that water doesn't come out and spray that child, spray that patron in the face at 115 degrees. The maximum is going to be 105 that we'd like to see at those particular fixtures. We do allow food and drink in our facilities, but only in designated areas. Water actually is allowed in an unbreakable container, actually in the swimming pool itself. Now, food and drink only allowed on the deck area, in an area that has been designated for food and drink. Now, that area is designated by you, the owner, or the manager of the facility. That's not identified by state code or state regulations, how many square footage you've got to have of deck area set aside. side. In fact, I've got some facilities, some country clubs, some hotels that identify the entire deck area as food and drink permitted. The key thing I want to emphasize is in unbreakable containers. No glass bottles, no glass plates, wicker baskets, something along those lines for food if somebody orders some chili cheese fries and some sliders or something like that to sit on the deck and watch the kids swim and eat is perfectly fine. But you will designate where that area is, or you can say, I don't want anywhere in my facility that has food and drink allowed. If you want to say it's out in the park under the tree where the picnic table's at, that's your decision. You decide where that's at. We will help you enforce that regulation in relation to your food and drink in your facility. You want to maintain that pool tub. Make sure that if there's any cracks or crevices, that they're caulked in. Make sure that that pool tub is nice and smooth. Any area where that caulking maybe has settled over the course of time, fill those in. We don't want any low areas where that water can accumulate or water can settle in and not be allowed to circulate very well. A great location for algae and slime to get started in your swimming pool. We want to be sure that those handrails are secure and in place. We don't want any of them where there's an opportunity you can grab a hold of those and pull them up and can slide out and possibly drop back into the swimming pool. We also want to emphasize slip-resistant treads. Those ladder rungs a lot of times will rotate, and I've seen situations, read accident reports, kids coming up out of the swimming pool, slip off of that top rung, slide down, hit their chin on that top rung, split their chin open, maybe even bite the end of their tongue off. I've seen actual accident reports related to that. Be sure that those ladder rungs are slip resistant. If they've been painted multiple times over many years, maybe use a good heavy wire bristle brush, roughen that up really good just to try to reduce those opportunities for those types of accidents in your swimming pool. Depth marks around your swimming pool. We want to identify how deep that pool is every 25 feet. We want to see at least 4-inch size lettering on those depth markings around the swimming pool, not only on the deck itself, but also on the inside edge of that pool tub. As someone walks up to that swimming pool, they need to see how deep it is on the deck itself. And then if you're in the pool, looking at the side of the swimming pool, you'd identify how deep it is as a patron swimming in the pool. We do allow a variance to be granted if that decking is set up to where that 4-inch lettering cannot be posted on the actual side of the swimming pool. We can allow that 4-inch lettering to be mounted onto the wall of the pool. If it's an indoor pool or possibly the fence, as long as it's not too far away. And then you also want to be sure that there's no deck chairs or any things that would be placed in front of that number that would reduce the opportunity for that patron to be able to see how deep that water is that they're headed towards or that they're in at that particular time. The pool deck, we want to see that it is in good repair, that there's no cracks, no crevices. We look for cracks usually about 1/4 of an inch in size. Anything greater than about 1/4 to 1/2 inch crack, your inspector's probably going to be identifying that at your facility. Watch for those low areas around on your decking that can have standing water set. Great opportunity for a slime mold, kind of an algae to get started and make it very, very slick environment. If you've got low-lying areas, sometimes mixing up some epoxy type of products, filling those in to reduce the opportunity for those slips and falls in your facility. Also want to make sure that your deck area is free of bags, free of strollers, types of things laying on the deck area. We want to allow room for emergency personnel. If your lifeguards or if your staff or even a patron sees someone struggling or having trouble in the water, we don't want to have a bunch of bags to be as an obstruction for them to not be able to reach that victim in a timely manner or as quickly as possible. So be sure that that deck area from the pool, maybe about 3 to 5 feet, there's no chairs or bags or left in the facility. We watch for those facilities that are in poor repair because they can result in slips and falls, often causing injuries. And as the coordinator for the swimming pool program, it's every year I get phone calls from attorneys requesting information out of inspection reports, out of files. They're looking for situations that their clients were exposed to and subsequent lawsuit possibilities. If it's identified on your inspection report with that decking or some type of situation like that, take steps, take means to address that situation to reduce the opportunity for those slips and falls in the facility. Now, in the unlikely and unfortunate event that there might be a drowning or near drowning situation at your facility, the state law requires that you must notify the department immediately. Notify the department immediately in the event of a drowning or near drowning. The information available for the 800 or the phone number that is available 24/7 is posted on the screen. It's 402-499-6922. That phone number is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the event of a drowning or near drowning situation. The difference between a drowning and near drowning. Drowning deals with body bags. We have a dead body, all right? I know what a drowning situation is, but a near drowning is a type of situation where we have an individual that requires some kind of action done to them, some type of medical attention, or else it will become a near drowning type of situation. We want to be sure as soon as one of those types of events happens, call the health department. Failure to notify the health department, if we find out about a situation like this, because it will be news, it will be in the newspaper. If we find out about it in the newspaper and you did not notify the department immediately after the event, we have and will take action on licenses or have the potential to take actions on licenses in those particular events. Now, if you've got a situation that there was an accident or an injury that requires hospitalization or medical treatment, now that's not a Band-Aid on a scratch or a Band-Aid on a boo-boo type of situation. We need you to identify that and send in an accident report to the department. Let us know what that situation was that required hospitalization or medical treatment, and we will have you send in the accident report form that's found on the back page of your Title 178, Chapter 2 Rules and Regulations. Need to notify within 24 hours under those particular types of situations. All Class A swimming pools need to conduct drills on how to handle various types of emergencies. How is it that you're going to handle a neck injury? What is it you're going to do under all different types of scenarios? Be sure that your staff, your guards understand your procedures, your policies that are in place on how to handle various types of emergencies, situations that may happen at your swimming pools. Reason why we have to be certified as pool operators in the state of Nebraska. It is identified in the state code that all Class A swimming pools, those are our municipal types of swimming pools, must be under the direct and immediate supervision of a Nebraska swimming pool operator. What do we identify as direct and immediate? I actually had a community one time contact me and said, will you please define for us the direct and immediate? What does that mean at a Class A swimming pool? Our legal section reviewed that question, and what they identified is at any time that that swimming pool is open, there must be a certified pool operator at that facility. So at our pool, we had, if you started swim lessons at 7 o'clock in the morning, that junior lifeguard class would start at 7 a.m. We had to have a certified pool operator on the premises. Now, at our pool, we would allow our lifeguards to teach private lessons from noon till 1 o'clock. The pool was open. It was available for private lessons from noon to 1 o'clock. That still meant that they were legally in the swimming pool. We allowed those lessons to happen. So even under that situation, we had to have a certified pool operator at the swimming pool during those swim lessons, the private or public swim lessons. During a swim meet, the swimming pool is open. Those kids aren't jumping the fence to go swim their laps at that swim meet. There must be a certified Nebraska swimming pool operator on the premises for swim meets also. covers all situations. Anytime somebody is allowed legally to get into that swimming pool, you've got to have a certified swimming pool operator. Now, Class B and Class F pools, a little bit different scenario. You must have a Nebraska swimming pool operator available for swimming available at those particular types of swimming pools, the B and F facilities. We have defined available in the state rules and regulations. It is within 60 minutes of the facility. In the event of an inspection, if I show up to your facility, your front desk at your hotel, or to the staff at the clubhouse, I ask the question, I'm here from the state to do an inspection at your swimming pool. I need to speak to your pool operator. If they have no clue who I'm asking for, the pool will be closed. They need to know who it is they need to get in touch with in the event of an emergency relating to the swimming pool clarity or the quality of the water or anything like that. And that person must be, by state law, within 60 minutes of the facility. When I show up to do an inspection, I'll get that individual on the phone, tell them I'm there to do an inspection, and they've got 60 minutes to meet me down at the swimming pool so they can show to me that they are in fact available for the operation and maintenance of that swimming pool. You need to check with your local jurisdictions. I know in Lancaster County, possibly Douglas County, they may have more stringent rules in relation to whether or not you have to be on the premises at a Class B or Class F facility. Check with your local inspector as to what their local ordinances, which may supersede the state law, actually require in those particular counties. What age do you need to be certified as a pool operator in the state of Nebraska? We currently have no age limit, no age restriction on being a certified pool operator, but there are some concerns in relation to OSHA regulations at swimming pools. No one under the age of 18 is allowed to enter into a pool pump room at a facility. So you can have a certified pool operator, an assistant manager, or somebody along those lines that can help out at those times when maybe you as the main operator are not able to be available or at the premises if it's a Class A swimming pool, that an assistant manager may be able to step in. But if there are any problems with the system, if they identify that the water quality doesn't meet the standards, they are not allowed to go based off of OSHA regulations to go back into that swimming pool pump room and make those changes and those adjustments. The responsibilities of those operators are to identify and keep the facility in compliance with the code. If there is a water chemistry or water clarity issue that they aren't able to make adjustments, in fact, any pool operator, if there's a problem and the facility does not meet water chemistry parameters, the pool, first and foremost, if there's patrons in the water, must be closed. Close the facility, and then if you're above the age of 18 or are able to go into the pump room or know how to make adjustments in the pump room, go in, make those adjustments, and once the facility has been identified as safe, as compliant with the Nebraska rules and regulations, you can allow the swimming pool to open back up. You need to have compliance with that code. Supervise the pool and user safety. Identify those concerns in the swimming pool by supervising those users. Correctly operate the recirculation system. All of these things are responsibilities of you as the operator. And of course, making sure that that water chemistry is in compliance by doing routine water testing, verifying that the water chemistry meets the standards. And like I mentioned, if it does not, you need to close the facility until those parameters are able to be met. The standards in relation to lifeguard requirements. The numbers of lifeguards that are required are based off of the number of swimmers and or the amount of surface area that's in the swimming pool at a Class A swimming pool. All Class A facilities must provide lifeguards. Lifeguard service is mandatory at Class A facilities. If you choose to offer lifeguards at a Class B or possibly Class F facility, you're allowed to have one lifeguard per 2,000 square foot of surface area. We do allow a number of bathers in relation to how many lifeguards for a Class A facility. You have 1 lifeguard per 100 bather or 2,000 square foot of surface area, whichever of those two numbers is lesser at your Class A facility. Class B or Class F, we do not allow a number of patrons to lifeguard ratio. Other lifeguard requirements. So if you've got at a Class A swimming pool, say maybe 10 to 15 patrons, 10 to 15 kids swimming at the pool, technically you could look at that component of the regulation and say, you know, we only need 1 lifeguard representing our swimming, 1 lifeguard on duty. You need to have an adequate number of guards in order to allow them sufficient rest periods. You need adequate number of guards on duty to allow periodic rest breaks of your guards out into the stands. They also must be in a position to be able to view all areas of the swimming pool. So if you take that ratio number of 1 guard per 100 bathers, you may need to have additional guards watching the pool area based off of the square footage, based off of the contour, the shapes of that swimming pool. You also, at a Class A facility, if the wading pool is not a separately licensed, separately fenced off wading pool, it is a part of your Class A facility, and it also must be observed, be guarded, maybe by the guard in the shallow area is able to view into that area where the wading pool is. That would be adequate supervision of that area, making sure that that guard keeps an eye on those kids down there. We cannot put up a no lifeguard on duty sign down in the wading pool area of a facility that is a Class A required to have lifeguard type of facility. The qualifications, the requirements identified in order to be a lifeguard. They must have completed a nationally recognized course for lifeguarding. The probably #1 lifeguard program class that's used in the state of Nebraska would be the Red Cross program. Boy Scouts, YMCA, there's several other types of programs that are accepted in the state of Nebraska, but they have completed a nationally recognized course in order to allow them to lifeguard. The CPR certification, the CPR requirement, must be renewed on an annual basis. I know almost all of the CPR cards that are available that I've observed over the past several years identifies that that card, that person having taken that class according to that agency that has issued the card, it is good for 2 years. However, very specific in our rules and regulations, it identifies that CPR for a lifeguard must be renewed on an annual basis. Those guards need to be provided upon request so that your inspector, the regulator doing the evaluation at the pool, is able to identify that those cards and those lifeguards are properly certified and that they have renewed their CPR class on an annual basis. The CPR course must have a practicum component associated with that class. I've had kids that have called me, I've had pool operators that have called me and said, well, I've got some guards that found a program that's available online to get CPR certified. Now I know touch screens and iPads have gotten really advanced, but I'm not exactly sure how you can demonstrate or how you can understand as the person performing CPR, how you're able to identify or demonstrate that on a mouse pad or on an iPad or something along those types of devices. It must be demonstrated, must have a practicum component of that CPR certification in that class. What are the rules relating to that CPR? Do you, as a certified pool operator, are you required, if all you are doing is acting as a certified pool operator, by state code to have the CPR class, to have CPR certification? Currently in the state of Nebraska, it is not a standard that you must be CPR certified. However, it is strongly encouraged. The more people that we can get out into the environment, into the public that can be certified in CPR, the better opportunity that if somebody has a problem, has a cardiac type of arrest, the quicker we can get that blood moving back through their system, the better off we're going to be. About 6 years ago or so, teaching this pool operator class out in Shatter, Nebraska. One of the people that attended the class took that information and took that to heart. They found out that there was a CPR class that was being offered in their community about a week or so after the certified pool operator course. They went ahead and got certified. Then I read about a month after that class a newspaper article identifying a situation that had happened at that particular operator's pool. What it said was that a boy is recovering after nearly drowning in an Alliance motel pool. He was not breathing at the time. The adult administered CPR and had the boy breathing again at the time rescue workers arrived. That child was not breathing. That individual identified the problem, started CPR, and saved that 7-year-old's life. Now, authorities say the adult who administered CPR had gotten certified in that rescue technique only weeks earlier. That was that pool operator that got certified after that pool operator class in CPR, saved that child's life. Is it required to be certified as a pool operator in CPR? No, it's not. But is it a really good idea if you're working in that particular type of environment of a swimming pool to have CPR? Absolutely. I strongly encourage everyone that's taking this class to get CPR certified. Now, as you have lifeguards at your facility, they need to have distinguishing swimsuits or some way to identify themselves as a lifeguard at your swimming pool. Now, you can do like Ronnie Reagan has done here in this particular picture of him, where he took his wrestling singlet and had lifeguard embroidered on his wrestling singlet. I've seen anything from swimsuits to sashes to visors, even patches that are sewn onto suits, identifying that individual as a lifeguard. We need to have the people in the community know who it is they can go to in the event of an accident, or if they need some help, who it is that they have you've identified as your guards at your facility. Not only do those guards need to be identified through some type of emblem or swimsuit, but they must have within arm's reach a rescue tube in order to do rescues in that particular swimming pool or at the facility. That rescue tube needs to be in good repair. This has been in the code for about 10 to 15 years now, and I'm seeing a lot of rescue tubes out there that are about 10 to 15 years old. Be sure they are in good repair, not all chewed up, that the rope is not going to rip or break or anything along those lines. The requirement in association with the water slides. You must have a guard within 50 feet of that discharge area of the slide. They can watch up to 3 slides maximum, and that guard is only allowed to watch that discharge area of that slide only. Now, do you need a slide attendant, someone operating that slide, standing up at the top of the slide? It depends on the construction and the configuration of the slide. If the patron that's going to use that slide is able to view that lifeguard at the bottom of the discharge area, and that guard at the bottom of the discharge area is able to identify that that guard or that patron is able to ride the slide correctly, identify that it is safe for them to go ahead and ride down the slide, you do not need someone operating that feature, someone at the top of the slide telling the kids when it's time to go. If that patron isn't able to see the bottom of the slide, then you need somebody up there to help run that feature, run that slide. The chairs for lifeguarding need to be properly located around the facility in order to view all areas of the swimming pool. Now, this does not identify that that guard must be sitting in that lifeguard chair. Maybe it might be best, depending on the number of people using the facility, to go ahead and have that guard down in that shallow area with the rescue tube, where all the patrons might be at that particular time. We just need to be able to properly see all areas of the swimming pool and have all areas guarded at the pool. There are a few exceptions to the lifeguard requirement for Class A swimming pools. During swim meets or swim competitions, you are not required to have lifeguards. However, during the Olympic time trials that occurred in Nebraska, the last 2 rounds of the Olympic time trials, they provided lifeguards during that particular swim meet, and it was a really good thing that we had guards on the deck at that facility at the CenturyLink building. There was a near drowning situation that occurred down at that event during the time trials. It was after the official Olympic time trials where we had an older individual in a Master League division that was competing and trying to qualify for other events across the United States that had a pacemaker that quit working and actually dropped to the bottom of that 10-foot deep pool. Luckily, guards were provided. They went ahead, rescued that individual, got him started back up, and everything was fine. Athletes, even world-class athletes, can have cramps, can have problems. I strongly encourage, even though it's not required to have lifeguards during swim meets, to go ahead and have some provided. The same scenario with swim classes. You've got yourself 100 to 120, little bitty kids that are just learning to swim. You're working with 3 or 4 of them over on one part of the swimming pool. You turn around and there's one of them floating face down in the pool. We have had drownings at swimming pools during swim classes. We always made sure that we had at least one individual freed up to be able to be up in the lifeguard stand to oversee everything that was going on during that swim class. Were we required to provide that guard service, have that guard up in the stand? No, we were not, but it really is a good idea during those swim classes, those swim meets, to provide that lifeguard service. In Class A swimming pools and Class A swimming pools only, by Nebraska code, Nebraska rules, we require a backboard with 3 straps. All other swimming pools, Class B all the way through F, it's not identified in our state code that a backboard with 3 straps needs to be provided. It may be, however, an insurance issue that your corporation may identify that at your hotel or apartment complex that a backboard be provided. That's fine if you want to go ahead and offer that, but it's not identified in our code for your hotel, motel, apartment, or community fitness type of facility. At your Class B, your hotel, motel, apartment complex, or Class F, your fitness facility type of pool, you must require and provide a ring buoy or a rescue tube available for patrons that maybe don't know how to properly enter the water to try to approach a victim, somebody that's struggling in the water. We want to provide equipment to those individuals to be able to get out into the water, get to that victim, and pull them back in. We want to see that rescue tube or ring buoy must be attached with a rope as long as the width of that swimming pool. In addition to this particular piece of rescue equipment, you also need to have a shepherd's crook with a pole at least 10 or 12 feet long, provided at those Class B and F pools. We need to make available to the patron the ability to reach that victim. We don't want people jumping into that swimming pool that don't know what they're doing. Every year we hear about multiple situations where there are dual drowning, multiple people drowning at the same time at a swimming pool or at a beach. What's happening is people think that they can get into that water if they're not properly trained, approach that person that's barely getting another breath, that individual's struggling. They're thinking they're about ready to drown. And here comes somebody to try to help them. And that person that's thinking they're going to drown, the next thing they're going to do is grab that person, shove them to the bottom of the swimming pool just to get another breath of air. That's where we end up with multiple drownings. We need to make available to those patrons the opportunity to reach that victim so that we don't have those particular types of situations. The signage at swimming pools need to provide signs posted in Title 178, Chapter 2, on page 13 of the Rules and Regulations. The pool regulation sign must have in 4-inch lettering pool regulations across the top of that, and it's bulleted out each and every one of the items that need to be listed on that pool reg sign. Also need to post the capacity of that swimming pool. On the pool pump room door, there needs to be a sign that states authorized personnel only, and that pool pump room needs to remain locked at all times and kept closed. The signage around that swimming pool at a Class A pool is not allowed to post a warning, no lifeguard on duty, because guards are required. All other pools, if you choose not to provide lifeguard service, you are allowed to post a sign that says children under the age of 16 must not use the pool without an adult in attendance. The children identified under the age of 16, we want to make sure that we've got adults available in order to maintain a healthy environment for those patrons in the swimming pool. The sign requirement says 16 and must not use the pool. Don't allow signs that say should not. There's a big difference between the term must not versus, well, you really shouldn't in the court of law. So be sure that that sign says 16 years of age and must not use the pool without an adult in attendance. Here's an example of that sign. Nice sign, big bold letters, warning, no lifeguard on duty. Children under the age of 16 must not use the pool or spa without an adult in attendance. In relation to signage at spa areas, we also want to identify that we have a sign at that spa that says no one under the age of 5 is permitted in the spa. It's been identified by the Centers for Disease Control that children under the age of 5, their body mass is so small that they really cannot maintain good internal body temperatures, and what happens is that body temperature of that child goes to the temperature of the spa. If your toddler had a fever of 103 or 104, you'd be freaking out. There's no reason why you should be placing your child in an environment that could potentially happen. Post a sign by that spa that says no one under the age of 5 is permitted. The boundary line between the deep and the shallow area of your swimming pool needs to be clearly marked, clearly identified. Not only by a rope that separates the deep from the shallow area of the swimming pool, but also by a line that's painted down the wall of the pool 4 inches wide across the bottom and up the other side. That rope is allowed to be removed during swim lessons or swim classes, as long as that lap swim or that swim lesson or swim class is a group supervised type of activity. That safety rope is allowed to be removed. The swimming pool needs to be completely enclosed. The enclosure around the swimming pool must be at least 6 feet high in fencing if it is a non-supervised entrance to the swimming pool. Most Class A swimming pools are going to have a front desk, somebody that's checking those patrons in. At a motel kind of a situation or an apartment complex, that gate entering into that swimming pool or that door entering into that swimming pool needs to be self-closing and self-latching. Completely closes all the way and latches closed. We encourage that that latch be at least a height of 54 inches to allow those small children so it doesn't allow them the opportunity to be able to reach that latch and be able to get into that swimming pool. We also watch for that fencing all the way around the pool, that there are no gaps that have occurred over the winter time any greater than about 4 inches in size. Close those gaps up. I had a facility one time that the fence had pulled apart, and what we did is we took those real heavy zip ties. We're able to strap those around and tighten up that particular area of the fence and close up those gaps. Telephones are required at swimming pools. A phone needs to be provided with the emergency numbers posted. Now, most emergency numbers across the state are 911. Some facilities may require a number 9 to be dialed to get to an outside number, or a different number to be dialed to get to an outside line. If that's the case, post that. You need to identify the name and address of the facility. A lot of patrons using your facility may not know the exact name and the address of the clubhouse. They may know the address of their apartment a block and a half or 2 blocks away, but they don't know the address where the actual accident has occurred. Provide that phone. That phone may roll to the front desk of the facility, where then they would have the opportunity to call out 911. That is a fine, that situation is okay, but there needs to be something provided at the pool for people to be able to reach an outside line to be able to get a hold of emergency personnel. The first aid requirements at facilities for Class A facilities are identified in Chapter 2 of our Rules and Regulations on page 6. The requirement of our first aid kits are located on that particular page, bulleted out item by item that you need to make sure that you've got at your Class A swimming pools. Now, all other classifications of pools just need to have a first aid kit available. It does not identify what needs to be in that first aid kit. Maybe just a few basic supplies, some bandages, some gauze, some wraps, some stuff like that. If there's a major incident that happens, somebody can do some immediate first aid, but just a first aid kit identified, located at all other classifications of pools is all that is needed. The water in the pool must be free of floating and suspended materials. That swimming pool water needs to be clear. You've got to be able to clearly see the main drain. For whatever reason, maybe that pool is out in the middle of a farm field on the edge of town, and if the wind's blowing really hard, you get white caps that form on the deep end of the swimming pool. If you cannot see that main drain, the entire swimming pool needs to be closed. If it's a cloudiness issue, you can't see that main drain, we cannot just close the deep end of that swimming pool. We need to close down the entire facility until the water clarity has been cleared up, and we can then see that main drain to make sure that that water is going to be safe. If you have an indoor swimming pool, you're required in that area of the swimming pool itself, if you've got a gas water heater, a carbon monoxide detector needs to be located in that pool enclosure. Now, back in your pool pump room, if that's where your water heater is located, in the pool pump room, in that pump room, regardless of pool type, you need to also in that area have and provide a carbon monoxide detector in that mechanical room. Water chemistry. The minimum amount of chlorine that is allowed in a swimming pool is 2 parts per million. The same number also for bromine. Now, those are minimums, the minimum amount of chlorine allowed. That is not a goal. That is what we have to have in order to be open. If you do not have 2 parts per million chlorine at any point in time during the course of the day, the pool needs to be closed. It is not complying with the regulations set forth for pools to be safe in the state of Nebraska. If you have a spa, a hot tub type of environment, we require a little bit higher free chlorine residual in those particular swimming pools. The chlorine minimum for a spa is 3 parts per million chlorine. The minimum for bromine in a spa is 4. A little bit higher minimum standards for chlorine and bromine, smaller volume of water, heated water, very hot water. Things change very, very quickly in those particular environments. Want to see a little bit higher minimum numbers. And again, those are immediate closure items. As the pool operator, it is your responsibility to see that the water chemistry meets those standards. If it does not, you take the initiative and go ahead and close the facility. The maximum number for all types of facilities, swimming pools, wade pools, spas, the maximum for chlorine is 10 parts per million. The maximum number for bromine, we allow a little bit higher level for bromine, just the way it acts in a swimming pool environment, is a maximum of 18. Again, That number, if it goes above 10 if it's chlorine or 18 for bromine, the pool needs to be closed. It does not comply to the state code. You have to shut down under those particular situations. The pH, how acidic or basic the pool water is, must be maintained in the range of 7.2 to 7.8 is the pH range. A little bit wider range than we talked about in the previous section relating to healthy swimming. But we're going to talk about why we want to focus that lower range in healthy swimming in another section here in a little bit. The pH range, 7.2, 7.8. If it's below 7.2, you need to close. Above 7.8, again, a closure situation. Now, the bad form of chlorine, the chlorine that we don't like to have in our swimming pool, combined chlorine, shall not exceed 0.5 parts per million in swimming pools. The stabilizer numbers, the stabilizer that is required to have by state law is identified as 50 parts per million. In our state code, it says that that is the closure item. That is what it needs to be, 50 parts per million. The alkalinity numbers, how well the water is to be able to fight back changes to the pH numbers, to pH, is a minimum of 80 that we require. There's no max number for alkalinity in the state of Nebraska. I've personally sampled water in swimming pools that have alkalinity numbers up in the 300 and 400 range, but the water clarity was so good you could read the date of a penny on the bottom of the swimming pool. So we don't have in the state of Nebraska an upper end limit to the alkalinity number, but the minimum that you need to make sure that your water is going to be able to keep a good balanced pH number is 80 parts per million. How often do you need to test the swimming pool water? It depends on how long your pool is open or how many times you need to test the swimming pool water. You need to sample the water prior to opening. Now that may change from day to day. At our swimming pool, we had our junior swim classes started at 7 o'clock in the morning. So before I could allow my junior swim candidates, junior lifeguard candidates, to enter into that swimming pool, I needed to verify that the water was safe for them to swim. If your pool is open at 1 o'clock, you just need to sample it prior to opening, and then every 4 hours following the time that the pool is open, it needs to be sampled again, tested for sanitizer and pH multiple times per day prior to opening and then every 4 hours. The water test for total alkalinity, the combined chlorine, the bad form of chlorine, the chlorine we don't like to have, and stabilizer, cyanuric acid, those tests are required to be done at a minimum, that's a minimum, you can do them more often if you so choose, on a weekly basis. These numbers need to be documented and written down. Must be kept on an attached Chapter 2 on the Chapter 2 Rules and Regulations. The back of the packet is a form that you can use to identify what your water chemistry and what your maintenance items or backwashing procedures were at your particular facility. It's got to be recorded and written down. What all needs to show up on that log sheet. If you choose not to use the state's log sheet, you have to be able to provide and identify the test results. How often? What were those numbers for chlorine, bromine, and also your pH? Those weekly tests, where are those written down? If you make any adjustments or modifications to the water chemistry, write that information down. You turned up the chlorinator. You added some soda ash in order to increase the pH. How much did you dump in? Write all of that information down. Multiple people at your facility may be doing tests. Multiple people at your facility may be adding water chemistry or adjusting water chemistry. You've got to have a central location where all of that information is written down so everybody is on the same page and talking to each other so that no adjustments are made without the other person not realizing that that product had already been added to the pool earlier that day. Any equipment maintenance that's done, need to write that down. Identify that flow gauge was adjusted or modified or updated, patron loads, how many kids were swimming that day. Give us a general number. That helps troubleshoot and identify potential problems because we had a really hot day, high bather load, lots of demand being placed on my chlorine, on my disinfectant, chlorine or bromine. So therefore, with that high bather load, that's the reason why I maybe had some problems with my chlorine levels being maintained or my bromine levels in my particular swimming pool. Always keep a copy of your pool operator card on site. All records by the state law need to be kept at least 1 year. Records in Douglas County have a 3-year record retention requirement in their particular county. What are some basic reasons for you as a pool operator that you need to keep in mind that would be reasons that you would need to close down your facility? Maybe you have excessive dirt, material floating in the swimming pool, lots of cottonwood cotton, lots of June bugs. Remove that out of the swimming pool. Reduce the demand being placed on your chlorine. Get that stuff skimmed out of the pool prior to opening. Keep the pool closed until it's had a chance to be cleaned for that day. If a fecal accident occurs, now I'm not saying or identifying what type of accident, just all forms, whether it's a formed stool, big old growler floating across the swimming pool, or a diarrhea, Hershey squirt kind of accident. All situations, fecal accident, your swimming pool was closed. The type of accident identified for how long you needed to close. And under no circumstances did we ever identify under all those situations that we were actually draining a swimming pool. You need to take steps first before you'd make a decision to go ahead and go that route. Weather conditions threatening. The National Lightning Safety Institute has identified procedures for you to follow for pool safety. Handouts are available that say identify when the procedures are that you need to close the swimming pool. It does not differentiate the difference between an indoor procedures versus an outdoor procedures. If there is a lightning storm in the area, you need to close your facility. All pools, whether it's indoor or outdoor. During a storm or lightning storm, you aren't going and filling your bathtub full of water and going and sit in it until the storm passes. The same thing applies to a swimming pool. It's very, very dangerous to allow patrons in that indoor pool during a lightning storm. If you do not have a pool operator available, or if they are not present, if they're not present at a Class A swimming pool, your pool by state law is not allowed to be open. If they're not available, as identified available within 60 minutes by state law, your local ordinance may require be more stringent, but by state law within 60 minutes of the facility at a Class B or Class F type of pool, you need to be closed. It's identified in the state law. If you are offering lifeguard service at your Class B or F pool and they're not available, your pool needs to be closed. If you're a Class B or F, you post that no lifeguard sign up, and under the age of 16 requirement with an adult, you can go ahead and reopen it at that time. But all Class A pools, unless it's a swim meet or swim class, you must provide lifeguards. If they're not there, your pool is not allowed to open. If your safety equipment at your facility is not available, let's say after a really busy weekend at your hotel, you come back on Monday morning and you're not sure what room your shepherd's crook ended up in. Your safety equipment that you're required to have, your ring buoy, your shepherd's crook at a Class A swimming pool, your backboard, the rescue tubes available to the guards. If that safety equipment is not available, you are not allowed to open at your facility. You as the operator need to take the initiative and stay closed. If you cannot clearly see that main drain, if it is not clearly visible, the entire pool is closed. The stabilizer levels, while it says 100 on this slide, the code states 50. 50 is the maximum that is allowed for stabilizer cyanuric acid. If your pH range is below 7.2 or above 7.8, under both of those situations, the pool needs to be closed. If your combined chlorine exceeds that 0.5 maximum allowed number, once again, close the pool, combined chlorine. And then finally, if your sanitizer, bromine or chlorine, is below the minimum or above the maximum that's allowed, again, as the pool operator under all of these different scenarios, you need to take the initiative. You need to see them be responsible and represent what the code needs to say and close your facility. The next section that we're going to be covering is circulation and filtration, moving that water throughout our facility and making sure that it is clean. When we talk about circulation, we've got ourselves a closed system. We have an environment in a swimming pool. We're going to fill that basin of water full of water at the beginning of the season or at the beginning of the cycle, and we're not going to drain it every 2 to 3 days or within a week. It's going to be drained out and then refilled. We're removing that water from that pool, sending it through the pump room, through a whole bunch of pipes and contraptions and things like that, and then bringing it back into the swimming pool. We're removing it and then returning that water back in. We're not removing it, dumping it to waste, and then refilling the facility. That's what we talk about when we're discussing circulation side of things. Now, the filtration, a component of circulating that water, is talking about the physical removal of the particles, the chunks, if you will, through some type of filtration medium. When we talk about circulation, the requirement is that it needs to operate 24 hours a day. We want to have good, effective sanitizer dilution so we can have proper sanitizer distribution throughout the facility. We've got a timer switch set up that shuts the pump off about an hour or so after the pool closes and then turns back on the next morning. We're not going to get that 24-hour, 7-day-a-week turnover rate, circulation through the system. We can have real problems with our water chemistry in an environment like that. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, moving that sanitizer, that disinfection throughout the facility. When we talk about circulating the water, it's influenced by a lot of different things: the shape, the contour of the pool, the circulation of the pumps, surface removal system, getting that dirty water out of the swimming pool, how well we're able to move that water around. One of the key components of circulating that water is the return lines, that water being injected back into the swimming pool. Now, if you're fortunate where you've got some of those return jets that have the little orifices that can be adjusted and moved to one side or the other. Had a pool one time I was at where we took and had a screwdriver and just gently tapped on it, turned each one of those orifices about 5 to 10 degree angle to one side, tipped them all the same direction. If the water level in our swimming pool had dropped down below the level of the gutter or the level of the skimmer, that water would sit there and just cycle around that swimming pool. If you had a ping pong ball, dropped it in the water, it would just sit there and do laps. I created kind of a lazy river, if you will, around that swimming pool. I was eliminating the dead spots in the corners of the pool by doing that, having that angled those orifices, those jets. The dirtiest part of our swimming pool is going to be the top 6 to 8 inches of our pool water. That water on the top of that swimming pool is where all the debris, all the dirt drops into that swimming pool. All of the kids coming up out of the water and spits a little bit that's left in their mouth into the water. If our chlorine is going to leave the swimming pool or bromine dissipates out of the swimming pool, it's going to dissipate up out of the surface of that swimming pool. So that's really the dirtiest part of our environment, of our swimming pool. That is the reason why we need to have a good guttering system. We want to maintain a good water level if you've got gutters throughout this facility in order to allow that nasty, dirty water, the floating debris, to be able to continuously offlow and out into that guttering system. If yours is set up to where you've got those metal grates or something setting down inside the swimming pool gutter, pull those out every so often, clean the debris out of there, reduce the demand being placed on your chlorine, reduce the demand being placed on your disinfectant by pulling those out, cleaning that dirt, that debris that accumulates down in the bottom of those. The key is to maintain good water level so that you get a continual off-flowing of that dirty surface water. Guttering systems are probably the best systems available because you get that continual off-flow, and it's throughout the entire area of the swimming pool. The second type of surface removal systems that we've got are skimmers. They're not as good as a guttering system because we refer to them as a point source removal system. At that location, at that point is where that water is going to be able to be collected and taken back to the pool pump room. There is where we're going to have the most amount of water turnover in that particular location. We've got ourselves a setup where there's a little skimmer basket that collects the larger debris, the leaves, the small toys, the bugs, those types of things. That's got a couple of little orifices, valves down in the bottom of them. One opening heads back to the pool pump room. If you let the water level on these skimmers drop down below the level of that skimmer, if you have an equalizer line that has not been disabled, has not been disconnected because of the Virginia Graham-Baker Act that addresses the safety of any suction points in your swimming pool, then there will be a suction point that occur because that pump, where that water line headed back to the pump room, is going to continually be asking and needing water pulled toward it. You let that water level drop down and air starts to seep down into the system, it can cavitate your pump impeller and not allow it to operate properly. Make sure that that water level is maintained up at a good, safe level in order to allow good continuous water flow, good circulation, and removal of that nasty surface water. The last point that I want to make in this slide is that these are not chlorination systems. Never, ever should you take chlorine tablets or bromine tablets and place them inside of these skimmers. It's a great location where customers, where our patrons can get access to those chemicals. And in fact, the day after Christmas, several years ago, I got a phone call from an emergency room doctor. He had a 5-year-old in his emergency room that had a tube shoved down his throat so he could continue to breathe. He came into the emergency room, severe burns in his mouth and in his throat, so much to the point that his throat was swelling shut and had trouble breathing. The ER doctor asked me to get out to that swimming pool as quickly as possible because he needed me to identify what was the chemical that that child was exposed to and was causing this type of reaction. Almost instantly when I walked into the swimming pool, I knew what was going on. I opened up the basket or the top of the lid on the skimmer on the deck, looked down inside, and there were a whole bunch of tablets where they had thrown a bunch of chlorine tablets down into that basket. As they eroded away, they got smaller and smaller, and little air bubbles formed on those small pieces of chlorine tablets. They floated up out of the skimmer and out into the swimming pool. There were about a dozen tiny pieces of chlorine. They looked like, maybe like a small Altoid mint is the best way to describe it, floating in the water. What had happened is that small child thought that that's what that was, a piece of candy, took that piece of chemical, put it into his mouth, and chewed it and swallowed it. Severe chemical burns in his mouth and his throat. We do not want to allow access to very, very caustic chemicals. And on another point, that's where that chemical is eroding and heading straight into the pump room, causing lots of potential damage to your pump impeller, to your filtration system. That's the strongest concentration of that disinfectant, causing lots of damage back in your pump room facility. Be sure, and I kind of mentioned this already, that you clean those strainer baskets out as needed. Very nasty situation. This operator said, I just cleaned that this morning. Well, yeah, probably not. Be sure that they're cleaned out. Really reduce the flow through the system when these are not cleaned properly. And also add a lot of demand on your disinfectant in your swimming pool. So what all is happening back in a pool pump room? We've got the pipes that are entering into the swimming pool, usually multiple pipes, one coming possibly from the main drain, maybe a series of pipes collecting the water from the north side of the skimmers of the north guttering system, series of pipes collecting the water from the south side, the south guttering system, all of these pipes converging into your pool pump room. The first thing, usually once those pipes come in and everything converges, is it will enter into a hair strainer. Very large device that collects those very large particles, pieces of paper, small leaves, debris that have passed through that skimmer or through that guttering system. This device, that hair strainer, is in place in order to protect the next component, one of the most vital pieces in your pool pump room, and that is the pump impeller. That hair and lint strainer keeps that debris from getting in contact with that pump impeller. That's a big metal device sitting inside of that big cylinder that spins at an incredibly high rate of speed, moving that water through the system, the pump impeller. The thing that spins the pump impeller is the motor. Attached to that drive shaft is the impeller, spinning at an incredibly high rate of speed, causing a lot of friction, movement of that water through the system. On this particular slide, I like to point out that the whole picture is here for us. All the way on the far right side of that slide is that hair and lint strainer. Then you've got the pump impeller. Attached to the pump impeller with a drive shaft is the motor that moves, spins that pump impeller at that high rate of speed. Be sure that at your facility, that drive shaft connecting the motor to the pump impeller is protected. We had an accident report one time that identified that there was a pool operator. She had long hair, had dropped a pencil down in the vicinity of the pump impeller by that drive shaft. That hair got caught into the drive shaft, snapped her neck, and killed her instantly. We want to be sure that that guard is in place. Go back to your pools, check to see that that drive shaft is not exposed, is not available for somebody to possibly get caught into that particular drive shaft. The next thing that happens is after that drive shaft, after that pump impeller, the water is then going to be forced toward the filtration system. Depending on how it's set up, in some situations, that pump may actually be located behind the filtration system, creating a vacuum, pulling the water through. In this particular side, we've got the water being pushed down that pipe into those great big huge vessels filled with sand that is going to be acting as our filtration system to remove the big particles out of the swimming pool. Another type of filtration system available is going to be these vessels that sit on the side. There's a little window inside there. You can look inside. There's a nice smooth bed of sand inside that sand bed or inside that filter. In that sand bed, the top 1/4 inch of that sand is what collects all of the dirt and the debris within the system. In order to clean these pressurized systems, shutting the pump off, reversing the flow through that system, changing the valve configuration, turning that pump on, upheaves that sand bed as that water is reversed through, blowing that dirty, nasty scum layer off and to waste within the filtration system. The last thing that's going to occur in your pool pump room is the chemical feed system. The injection of that very corrosive disinfectant within your swimming pool is the last thing that's going to be happening. We've got all the dirt, the debris, the bugs, the germs that are going to be occurring out in the swimming pool. That's where we want to have our chemical be the best concentration and distributed the best. So the last thing that's going to happen in that pump room is that chlorine or bromine feeder in order to get that disinfection out into the swimming pool itself. Lots of automated types of systems available to us. If you've got a digital automated system, be sure that you understand how this particular system works in order to override the system. Unfortunately, in Nebraska, we've got very hard water, and the hard water has a direct impact on how well those sensors, those probes are able to monitor that disinfectant, that pH, and determine if it needs to add more chlorine or pH adjustment type of stuff within your facility. Know how to override if you have to, know how to calibrate, know how to adjust your system if in fact that's what you've got located. Then finally, the last thing that you're going to be doing after that's been injected into the system, that chlorine has been fed in, is the return pipes gathering all that water and injecting it back out into the swimming pool basin. It's required at all facility now in the newest update of our regulations that a flow gauge needs to be provided. What does a flow gauge do for us? It measures the amount of flow flowing through that particular chunk of water in gallons per minute. How many gallons are flowing through that chunk of pipe in 1 minute's time? It helps us identify the turnover rate within our swimming pool. Unfortunately, they're not super accurate. There's a little ball that will float up and down inside different types of systems. They're about 10 to 15% accurate. I always, with my flow gauge at my system, I would check on a daily basis. It would help us identify issues, identify problems within the system, and figure out that there might be a reduce in flow or an increase in flow determining or based on the different type of situation that you may have. Some other types of flow gauges, other than the little ball that floats up and down, which is a lot of them that we see out there. We've got a little digital analog type of setup. There's an analog, this is a digital reading, and that particular gauge was reading 929 gallons of water were flowing through that chunk of pipe at any given minute. Incredibly large amount of water. But when you consider that this is a 350,000 gallon swimming pool, you're going to need to have a pretty large volume of water flowing through that chunk of pipe at any given time. Now, I mentioned that that flow gauge helps us identify issues and problems within the system. If your flow rate changes, there's different scenarios that may impact the flow through your system at various points in time. One situation that may happen that would cause a reduction in flow rate is if your skimmer basket, like that previous slide that I had a few slides ago, was completely full of leaves, of debris, would reduce the amount of flow moving through your skimmer system and reduce the amount of flow to your pump impeller, showing that then on your flow gauge, on your flow rate. If your pump impeller located inside the system attached to that motor happened to get damaged, or maybe gets a lot of leaves or hair wrapped around it, or cracked in some way and gets out of balance, the flow through the system is going to be reduced. That flow gauge will identify a reduction in flow that could be a result from that pump impeller not moving as efficiently as possible. The gauges on your filters can identify that your filter bed is getting to the point where it's not able to move as much water through as possible. Now, in a filtration system, the flow through the system is going to be dramatically affected by how dirty the filter is itself. But the thing to keep in mind is right before you clean the filter system is when that filtration system is going to actually be doing the best job. As that scum layer builds up on that sand bed, smaller and smaller particles are going to be collected out of that water. As those particles get collected out, the water flowing through that sand bed is going to get cleaner and cleaner over the course of time. But unfortunately, the amount of water flowing through that sand bed is going to drop down dramatically at the tail end of the filter cycle. Your flow gauge, your flow through the system is going to be impacted, and that flow gauge would indicate that something needs to be done. By checking those filter gauges, it will identify that that's where the problem is, make those adjustments, and that will improve that flow rate back up within the system. This particular scenario, the filter media, that big sand bed, or the cloth socks on your diatomaceous earth system, if they would get damaged, or that sand bed, the series of pipes in the bottom of the sand bed where the water's collected would happen to break off or get damaged, all of that water is going to look for the place of least resistance, where that water can go to the quickest. You open up that sand bed, you look down inside, instead of seeing a nice level bed of sand, it looks like the Grand Canyon. Great big crevice heading down to where that cracked manifold, that cracked piping is located. That is going to cause a change in flow within the system because there is no resistance any longer in that sand bed, in that filter. So the water flowing through the system is just going to go straight down. Very, very quickly, the flow in your system, that flow rate will go up under that particular scenario. Look for obstructions, another example where the flow could be dropping or go down. Balls, toys, and drains, I've seen that. Various types of obstructions within the piping, leaves maybe after the fall and the winter down in the piping areas that might need to be cleaned out. All are going to impact the flow rate through your system. The reason why we need to know the flow through the system, it helps us identify the turnover rate. The turnover rate, what does that mean? It's the amount of time that it takes for the entire volume of our swimming pool to have been filtered. It's the rate of turnover of the volume of the pool to have gone through the filter room. It's based off of the volume of our pool water. The volume is calculated. We're going to take the length of the swimming pool. We're going to multiply the length of the pool by the width of the pool. How wide is that swimming pool? Then we're multiplying that by the depth. Now the depth, a lot of times is going to need to be an average depth based off of the measurements from the 3 foot to the 5 foot area of your pool. An average depth is going to be about 4 feet. Multiplying that, because that number is in cubic feet, multiplying it by a 7.5 number, that converts cubic feet into gallons for us, gives us that volume number that we need to have. So to calculate the length times the width times the average depth, getting us the volume. Once we've got that number, we can then go ahead and calculate the turnover rate at that particular time in our system. The turnover rate is going to equal the volume of our swimming pool that we just calculated from that previous equation. The volume is divided by the rate of flow at that given point in time. Go back into the pool pump room. Look at that little ball floating up and down, or that gauge on that valve or on that readout. Dividing that volume of the water by the gallons per minute flowing through that chunk of pipe. 60,000 gallons of water is what I'm going to use as an example, and a flow of 300 gallons per minute. We need to divide those two numbers out and then also divide that by 60. Because it's in gallons per minute, we want to know how long it takes for the volume of the pool water to filter through the system in hours. So that's why we have to divide by the 60 in order to get it to convert into hours. Under the example that I've given here, 60,000 gallons of pool water with 300 gallons per minute moving through the system divided by 60, you get a turnover rate of 3 hours and 20 minutes. It's 3 hours and 20 minutes for 60,000 gallons of water to have passed through your filtration system. Is that an adequate turnover rate for your particular swimming pool? It's all based off of the type or the depth of swimming pool that you've got. Now, if you've got a spray park type of situation where there is no standing water, the water sprays out of various features or dumps out of buckets or something like that onto the patrons, and there's no standing water for anybody to stand in, and the water is recycled, it's recirculated through the system, you need a turnover rate, the volume of your recycled water every 30 minutes needs to be filtered. The pool area is less than or equal to 2 feet in water depth, no greater than 2 feet in water depth, you need a volume of your swimming pool to be turned over once every hour under that particular situation. Now, if your swimming pool is between 2 and 3 feet in depth, you need a turnover rate of 1 volume of pool water for every 2 hours. If your volume is between 3 and 5, you need 1 volume every 4 hours in order to ensure you've got an adequate turnover rate. Under the example that I gave on the previous slide, that 60,000 gallon swimming pool, that actually was a lap pool at a fitness facility. The average depth of that lap pool was right at about 4 to 4.5 feet deep. So under this situation, between 3 and 5 feet in water depth, they needed 1 volume, there's 60,000 gallons of pool water, to be cycled through the system once every 4 hours. The example that I gave was a turnover rate of 3 hours and 20 minutes. More than adequate to meet the criteria to ensure that you have a proper turnover rate. The last example that we're going to give is a pool volume where you've got it greater than 5 feet in water depth. If you've got a diving well at your swimming pool, the turnover rate, 1 pool volume per every 6 hours or less in order to ensure that you're meeting that turnover rate requirement. Now, how effective your filtration system is going to be is based off of the type of system, the amount of surface area inside your swimming pool filtration system, how fast you can move the water through the filtration system, how dirty the water is also is going to have a dramatic impact on how effective your filtration is going to be able to be. All the systems, every one of them, are going to be equipped with a filter gauge or filter gauge system in order to ensure that that filtration system is working properly. There are 2 basic types of filtration system. The first one that we're going to talk about is a pressure system, a pressurized system. The pump on a pressure system is always located in front of the filter. The water is being pushed through that sand bed or through that filter medium. It's a closed reservoir, a closed tank that is under pressure, hence the term a pressure system. Typically, the way these are cleaned, the way we identify that they are dirty is going to be using the gauges again, but you're going to be reversing the flow of water through that vessel, switching that flow of water. If it's a sand bed, it will upheave that bed of sand. The dirty scum layer that's built up on the top 4th inch of that sand bed will be blown to waste and be washed away. If you've got like a powder DE system, all of that powder will be washed off and then need to be recoated back onto the sand bed in order to ensure it's working properly. They all need to have gauges, pressure systems, vacuum systems, doesn't matter what type. Watch those pressure gauges. I am not going to identify what the gauge needs to read in order for you to need to go ahead and backwash the system. Each system is a little bit different. Each pool is a little bit different based off the configuration of the system. This particular one, this rapid sand system, between 8 to 10 pounds pressure difference between the water coming in versus the water coming out, hence the 2 gauges doing the readings, would identify that it needs to be backwashed. The water flow through the system, this is the normal operation system. The water would be reversed, upheaving that sand bed, collected, and then sent to waste. You continue that backwash process until the water through that sand bed is running clear through that discharge pipe. The other type of system that we've alluded to is the vacuum system. This is where the pump is actually located behind the filter. The water is being pulled through the system. It's a big open bed of sand or open a pit where there's a whole bunch of either tubes or cylinders that have kind of a cloth element that your filtering media would adhere to, or if it's a big sand bed where your sand would rest inside these great big reservoirs. Be sure if you've got a diatomaceous earth, a DE system. In fact, this is a magnified photograph of a diatom, fossilized remains of a diatom. Each one of those little cracks or crevices inside that diatom can actually collect a particle of dirt. Once those get dirty, they need to be removed off of the cloth elements. Check your vacuum gauges. Once they get to the point where that vacuum is built up to the point where it needs to be cleaned, shut the system down, drain the water out of the tank, if it's a DE system, clean all of that old dirty DE powder off of the cloth elements and let it flush to waste, and then fill the pit back up and then recoat those cloth elements. Be sure that if you've got one of those types of systems, that those cloth elements down in that pit never get torn and they get replaced on a regular basis. If they get a rip in them, that powder will dissipate right out into the swimming pool and turn your pool into a white, milky substance, incredibly difficult to clean up if you get that situation. Multiple different types of systems that are available to us when we talk about filtration. We've got sand systems, not only gravity sand, great big open pit, but rapid and high rate systems that are under pressure, diatomaceous earth, and in fact, we've even got cartridge types of media that can be placed into these great big filter reservoirs that are made out of a paper product that collects the debris and the dirt out of the swimming pool itself. Every system that's available to us, every system that's out there has gauges. Whether it's vacuum or pressure gauges, they must be functioning, must be operational. That's the only way to identify the amount of pressure being built up or vacuum being built up within the system to know when and if it needs to be cleaned. Anytime that you fill your swimming pool, you need to protect the potable water source that's being provided to your facility. You never want to connect a hose directly to a hose bib without having something in between that hose and that hose bib where the end of that line could be dumped into the swimming pool, or even worse, placed in the bottom of a dirty mop bucket. What can happen is pressure can end up going the opposite direction. Bunch of hydrants turn on, the sprinkler system turns on at the baseball field or on the football field. All of the water which used to be under pressure in your facility at the kitchen tap or at the fixtures, the taps, will reverse, head towards that hydrant, head towards that sprinkler system, and it can suck that dirty water in your swimming pool back into the drinking water supply. Don't ever have a direct source, direct connection. The best scenario that you can have if you're going to fill your swimming pool or fill that mop bucket is keep the end of that line out of the pool water. Have an air gap separating the end of that line with the water itself. The other option is going to be at the end of that hose bib, have a backflow, back siphon device attached to the end of that hose bib where the hose would then be attached to it. Having that device between the end of the potable water tap and the hose itself, if there would be a back siphon situation, there's a little valve inside that small device that would slam shut and keep that water from sucking back into the drinking water supply. Another example of that back siphonage device where it's incorporated into the system, we see a lot of these on newer types of swimming pools being installed. The Virginia Graham-Baker Act. We've been talking about the Virginia Graham-Baker Act in our swimming pool clinics for a number of years now. What does it deal with? Not only entrapment of hair, jewelry, and limbs, but also the entrapment of whole bodies. We have had the Virginia Graham-Baker Act actually incorporated into Nebraska law for about 4 to 5 years now. I'm proud to say that all swimming pools in the state of Nebraska have been in compliance with the Virginia Graham-Baker Act, were placed into compliance when that law originally went into effect. All facilities were required to submit to us and tell us what you did in order to place your facility into compliance, so whole body or hair or jewelry entrapment would not happen. Under several situations, we have had indications that these systems are no longer in place. If you do not have what's in place, what you were originally approved with, your facility will need to be closed. And whatever was originally submitted needs to be put back into place. That is what had happened to this individual in this slide. Small child, at this particular swimming pool, there was just a single main drain at that pool, about the size of his body, had a solid plate on the top of that main drain with slots all the way around the outside of that main drain. That was a Virginia Graham Baker approved drain cover. Now, at that facility, they had just that single main drain in the bottom of the pool. A lot of facilities, especially newer ones, may have a dual drain system, or a drain that is constructed to be so large that you could not get a body, a person, to cover up the entire drain for it to become a suction point. Or a dual drain system where two drains may be located over 3 feet apart, that if that small child would have gotten onto one of the drains, all of the suction would have been occurring out of the other drain at the facility. So he would not have gotten stuck there. But all they had was that single main drain. Because there was just that one drain, they had to have located back in their pump room a second level of safety. And in this case, it was a Stiegel, safety vacuum release system. That safety vacuum release system mounted on the wall senses the pressure differential within the system at any given moment in time. If there's a large differential within the system of pressure, what would happen is it would shut the entire system down. So if this little guy got stuck on that drain, that safety vacuum release system would sense that there was an sudden increase in pressure, and shut down the pump instantly, preventing him to get stuck on there. But at this facility, what happened was that safety vacuum release system, every time they started it up at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of the year, about every 5 to 10 minutes, it would shut the system down, shut everything off. They'd start it back up. It would start running again. About every 5 or 10 minutes later, it would shut off again. They did this several times. They figured the way they would go ahead and fix this so the pump would continue to run, they disabled the Stiegel system. They disabled the safety vacuum release system. This child got exposed to that drain cover, got stuck to it. Fortunately, he did not die. But if you've got a system in place, which all systems in Nebraska were required to be in compliance, you've got to make sure what you have there is in good repair, is in place, is not cracked, and is not damaged. Also be sure, we just discovered this here a year or two ago, that all of those drain covers have got expiration dates on them. There is not a single manufacturer that I know of that has said that that drain cover is good for the life of the facility or the life of the pool. They all need to be replaced. Check to see when that drain was installed. Check to see the date that drain, how long it is good for. If it needs replaced, get it changed out. Have that documentation so when your facility is inspected, that inspector is able to look at the information provided to them and identify that that drain cover is in compliance and has been properly replaced as needed and in compliance with the Virginia Graham Baker Act, preventing those entrapments at facilities. Replace them if they have expired and make sure that the documentation is identified and when it needs to be replaced again. Another federal law that went into place is associating with the Americans with Disability Act. What it says is that all commercial swimming pools must remove obstacles to prevent people from being able to enter into the swimming pool. The ADA technical hotline, 1-800-872-2253. The website available to us in order to look up the ADA standards, the ADA requirements to place your commercial facility. That's all our city pools, our municipal pools, our hotels, and our motels need to be in compliance with the ADA standards. What do those standards say? Contact their website, get in touch with their website, call their 800 number to find out what that standard is. They are not incorporated into and will not be incorporated into Nebraska state law and Nebraska state code. We are not going to oversee the administering of the Americans with Disabilities Act. However, if your decision is made to place yourself into compliance with the Act by removing a section of wall, by installing a set of stairs that are permanent, a ramp that is permanent, or making your pool like a zero depth pool or something like that, or installing transfer walls or transfer stairs, you need to notify the state health department. Plans and specifications need to be submitted to the department in advance of that project in order to place yourself into compliance. We do not want to have to go out to a pool that's installed a new set of stairs, modified the structure of their pool tub, and not have submitted plans and specs. Please get that done prior to construction. Now, if your decision to place yourself into compliance with the Virginia Graham-Baker Act is involving installing a chair lift or some type of lift apparatus, placing it into compliance, on the deck, or you've purchased a temporary set of stairs, some that can be removed and installed, depending on the situation, or a ramp that could be placed in or taken out. Those lifts, the temporary stairs or temporary ramp do not need to be submitted and have reviewed by our engineers. Plans and specs are not required under those particular situations.